Good. South Africa officially out of a recession as well. And these price adjustments that we saw in the fuel price coming after last month's record hike in the fuel price of fuel. It saw petrol increasing to 17 Rand and 8 cents a litre, while diesel went up to 15 Rand and 69 cents a litre. Let's talk to Economist who's in studio with us, Azar Jammine. He, of course, is the Chief Economist at Econometrix. Always good to see you, Azar. Thanks so much for coming in.
You, Leanne.
So, I mean, this is good news. You know, we've finally, after a very difficult year of seeing petrol going up, we're being in a recession, everything has been quite tough. It's a good month, but let's talk to you and this out of a recession.
There's no question that the cut in the fuel price is huge. It's massive and will certainly give a little bit of breathing space to the average consumer. But let's not get carried away by the fact that we are out of recession officially. You know, there are many statistical quirks here. We shouldn't have been in recession in the first instance were it not for a dramatic fall-off in agricultural production in the first half of the year. But, you know, when you're talking about 0, 1, 2% economic growth with a population growing at 1.6% per annum, you're really talking about an economy that is standing still. Okay. And if anything, living standards, if not going sideways, are actually falling.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at these figures of a 2.2% increase in economic growth, I mean, is that not a sign that things, even though it's still a little bit stagnant, but I mean, is that not a sign that the turnaround is there and that we should see further growth next year?
I think you've got to put it into perspective. A lot of that had to do with the fact that agricultural output fell so sharply in the first half of the year, and now it's starting to recover. If you look at the rest of the picture, it's
not great.
Not great.
Even though if we look at you know, the secondary sector being attributed to economic recovery at 4.5%, manufacturing sector up 7.5%.
Yes, it sounds very good, but it's coming off such a depressed base in the second quarter that if you also calculate it on a year-on-year basis, we're really again talking about 1 or 2%. The fact that it was 7% in the third quarter compared with a very depressed second quarter, I think we just got to be a little careful in getting carried away with optimism.
Okay. And agriculture, I know you've cautioned about that as well.
Well, yes, I think it is coming right. I think it is normalizing, and it's precisely the likely further improvement in agriculture that will see economic growth exceeding 1% next year. But even that is not really sufficient, and we now have a new dynamic that is terrifying, and that is the Eskom load shedding story. We don't fully understand, for the man in the street, how serious it is or it isn't, but if it is really bad, then that is going to prevent our economy from even reaching 1% next year.
And it is a big worry. I mean, when we start getting warned that on a Sunday we're having load shedding, I mean, that we've got to read a lot into that. The fact that industries mostly are closed and it's kind of affecting the residents, and they're saying that, look, we need to save wherever we can. And this is, I mean, I think the situation at Eskom is far worse than we ever anticipated. I mean, what do you read into it?
I'd like to think that, you know, I'd like to believe Eskom that say that it's going to return to normal by March next year. But, you know, we've had many examples of where they've promised and not delivered subsequently. And as concerning as the operational interruptions to electricity supply is the financial implications. I heard this morning on the news that Eskom is now saying they want another 100 billion Rand from government as a bailout.
100 billion.
100 billion. Well,
can you imagine?
You know, if that happens, then the chances of us being downgraded further are very high this time next year.
Yeah. So that's the real thorn in our side, is Eskom.
Correct. Yeah. Some people like Goldman Sachs earlier this year said that it is the #1 risk in South Africa at present.
Yeah. I mean, which is worrisome as well, because as much as we may be celebrating a couple of things right now, that is always hanging over us, and it's a big thing because this is our electricity supply, it's our sole electricity supplier, and that is really the company that has held us back and keeps holding us back. In your opinion, what should be done with Eskom?
Well, it's quite clear that there has to be a complete rethink about how Eskom should operate, how electricity supply should operate. And many people for over many years have been talking about the advisability of breaking Eskom up into 3 different areas: generation, transmission and distribution, and operating each of those on a different basis. So I suppose semi-privatizing at least some of those, because once you have outside shareholders, there is an oversight and a sense of accountability that comes into play that tends to improve efficiency. Whereas right now, okay, if we need more, let's go to government, get another 100 billion. That's not the way to solve the problem.
No, it certainly isn't. And also, it then comes onto us where these proposed increases come in, and South Africans end up paying more and more for electricity that we're not actually getting. And that's a big problem.
That's right. But it also goes to the heart of the ideological divide that exists in South Africa between those who seek market-oriented solutions to our problems and those who say, no privatization, everything's got to be handled by government itself, despite the fact that we've seen so many inefficiencies emerging from total government control.
Yeah. If we look at the mining sector as well, and this is something that's quite big. I mean, we're seeing that it used to be our primary industry. It fell by 8.8%. And contributed minus 0.7% of a percentage point to the GDP. I mean, that just paints a picture of how far we've really fallen in this mining sector.
Mining is just vanishing as a base for South Africa's economy. It's very sad to see that the heartland of where this economy grew from is actually fading. And unfortunately, we face a massive uphill task in dealing with organized labor, which has been extremely disruptive for both mining and manufacturing in the last year or so. And until we sort that out, I think there's going to be still further decline in those sectors.
So if we just wrap up on a positive note, I mean, the finance sector is looking a little bit better. I mean, are we heading in that direction as an economy, maybe a service-based economy? I don't know.
Well, it's very interesting. I listened to the president of the World Bank at a seminar on Monday night, and he made it quite clear that the only way out is for South Africa and Africa to join the digital economy of the future. But the real challenge there again is that our educational system, especially in science, technology, engineering and mathematics, is so unprepared for the fourth industrial revolution, and we don't seem to be making the right progress in that regard. So those are the real challenges. I mean, the potential in South Africa is enormous, but until such time as we improve our maths and science outcomes from a very early stage in a child's life all the way through to university, I think we're going to struggle to lift our economy upwards properly.
All right, Azar, thank you very much for talking to us. Azar Jammine, Chief Economist at Econometrix. Well, South Africa is out of a recession, but as you've heard, our economy grew by 2.2% in the third quarter of a very, very low base. So it is good news, but there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to turn things around. All right, let's get your weather update.